On this episode of Civic Cocktail, we talk with Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson about the issues his office is tackling.
Those travel restrictions that we've read about, our lawsuit seeks to have those declared unlawful.
Would you consider a run for governor?
Oh, man. I just got reelected.
And we gather a panel of leaders in local media to discuss the changing state of journalism.
Ask questions, tell the truth, speak for the common man.
Frankly, I think you've got to get out of the bubble.
Everybody's job just got more important, and everybody here's job just got more important. And we are the opposition, it's true.
And we will never shut up, ever, ever.
It's all coming up on Civic Cocktail.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a brand new season of Civic Cocktail. I'm Joni Balter here this evening with Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson. Hi, Mr. Attorney General. Thanks for being here. Two journalists helping with the questioning in this segment. Don Shelton, he's the new executive editor of the Seattle Times, and Greg Hanscom, editor-in-chief of Crosscut.com. So, Attorney General Ferguson, a few days ago, you became the first Attorney General in the country to challenge Donald Trump's executive order on immigration. What exactly, this is going to get kind of, okay, we got it. What exactly are you trying to accomplish, and what can you and any court do?
Sure, so it's pretty straightforward. And first, thanks for having me on, Joni, really appreciate it.
Thanks for being here, really appreciate it.
It's pretty straightforward. This lawsuit that we're filing seeks something pretty simple, and that is to have key provisions of that executive order declared unconstitutional and therefore unenforceable. So those travel restrictions that we've read about, our lawsuit seeks to have those declared unlawful. If a court agrees with us here in the Western District of Washington, and we have a hearing set for Friday, by the way, a court here has the power to obviously agree with our position. That would have the impact of actually declaring that null across the country, not just in Washington State.
Interesting. So I think there might be some confusion between your lawsuit and some of the court action that took place immediately with judges from Brooklyn and a couple other places.
That's an important distinction. In those early filings that very first weekend, those were important, but they were taken on behalf of a group of individuals or a handful of folks, so it would impact those folks in order to enable them to get to their destination, travel to the United States. It did not do a challenge overall to the executive order, to the bigger constitutional issue. So it was on behalf of those individuals and granted them relief, but does not get to the larger issue of whether or not the executive order is actually constitutional, and that's what we're driving at with this litigation.
So courts by definition can be slow and kind of plodding. So it seems that there is sort of a long-term strategy and a short-term. Can you kindly lay out that difference for us?
Sure. So long-term strategy is I'm pretty confident that this will end up before the U.S. Supreme Court at some point, right? In the short term, though,
how long would that take? Years, right?
The legal process can take its time, but on an issue of this magnitude, it can move more quickly. That said, one thing we're asking for, we filed our complaint, but we also filed a motion asking for a TRO, a temporary restraining order. So the judge has the power to grant that, which would effectively declare that order null and void until the courts ultimately decide the merits on it. So that's what we're seeking with this judge in the Western District of Washington.
Any sense of the likelihood of that?
Well, we feel optimistic. I would not have filed this unless I thought we would prevail. Filing a litigation against President Trump and the Trump administration, I don't take that lightly, right? That's there's a lot of resources that go into that, and it's an important case. So I would not have filed it unless I thought we would prevail and that it was the right thing to do.
So Expedia and Amazon filed supporting briefs. Maybe Microsoft's going to join. I wasn't certain of that. Well, what is the impact of that on what you're trying to argue?
Sure. So one thing we want to and need to show before the court is the impact on Washingtonians. In order to do that, we want to show the impact on individuals, but also on businesses. And so on Saturday, when we were working around the clock this weekend at our office, I reached out to Expedia and to Amazon, to their corporate counsel, and said, hey, we're filing this Monday. Do you want to file a declaration in support based on the impact to your employees and to your business? And to their great credit, on the weekend, They put those together, and we were able to file those declarations in support of our complaint and our motion for a TRO.
So clearly everybody has everybody's cell phone and sort of the way that works.
We work closely with, the corporate counsel for Expedia, for example, is a former, when I worked at Preston Gates Nellis in the litigation department, he was another associate in the litigation department, so I've known him for a long time. So, of course, these are folks who we know one another.
So there'll be more on this, but I want to switch the topic here for a second. You were front and center, just like it seems like, a long time ago now, in a bipartisan effort to repeal Washington's death penalty. Do you think this will be successful in the legislature this year or next?
This year or next, you gave me a little wiggle room, which I appreciate. So you gave me an extra year, so I appreciate that, right? Yeah, I need that, yeah.
You just kind of need that sometimes.
So I would say that I feel, if you're giving me a couple years to work with, I feel somewhat optimistic. I mean, it's a challenge for this session right now because, frankly, the state Senate is saying they won't hear it unless the House passes it. The House says we won't take it up unless the Senate, they're refusing to hear it, so why should we pass it? So they're frankly pointing fingers at each other. I find this frustrating and maddening for the following reason. We can't find out when the last time, it's been so long since the legislature, even at a committee level, took any kind of vote on the death penalty. One of the most important criminal justice issues of our time, right? Legislatures around the country are taking this up and repealing it, but our legislature won't even have a vote in a committee level. I am confident if the vote went before the full Senate and the full House, a repeal would take place. It's getting there that's the challenge.
So when you announced this, that you're hitting a point that I was thinking about. I thought, well, wow, he must have really worked the House and Senate. He's got this lined up, but did you think you did?
Well, no, I wouldn't. I mean, saying I had it lined up, no, that'd be saying too much. I mean, I felt that there is strong support, bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate. We always knew just getting through that first hurdle of getting heard in committee and getting votes in committee would be a challenge. That's why I appreciate Rob McKenna, my predecessor, Republican Attorney General before me, joined me at the press conference. Rob and I have been talking about the death penalty for some time, and I really appreciate his, frankly, courage and willingness to stand up at a press conference as a leading Republican in the state and say, look, this doesn't work anymore, it's time to repeal it.
So effectively, why do we need the law to change? We already have a moratorium in place by Governor Jay Inslee.
That's correct. So the moratorium, there's some confusion around this. The moratorium lasts only as long as Jay Inslee's the governor. So when a new governor comes into place, and the next governor can either choose to continue the moratorium or not. So it is temporary by nature. Obviously, repeal would be permanent.
So we thought about inviting you to the show way back, early January, right. When you announced that you were also introducing this year a proposed assault weapon ban. Do you think, we're talking about the legislature here, do you think the legislature would approve such a thing? Or is this a prelude to an initiative?
So the proposal does two things. One, it repeals, it says you cannot purchase an assault weapon. Okay, number one. Number two, which is frankly equally important, is it limits high-capacity magazines to 10 rounds. Right now, there are no limits to the number of rounds you can have with an assault weapon, for example. It became very clear very quickly that the legislature would not consider that, which I find deeply disappointing. So we proposed an alternative bill, which there is a hearing tomorrow morning in the House, which essentially says, folks may find this hard to believe, but one only has to be 18 years old to buy an assault weapon in this state. You can walk into a Cabela's, purchase an assault weapon, and walk out with it without a waiting period and without law enforcement doing a background check. If you want to buy a pistol, you have to be 21, not 18. You walk into that Cabela's to buy a pistol, you cannot walk out with it. You have an effective waiting period of up to 10 days while law enforcement does a background check. In other words, it is easier, much easier, for a teenager to get an assault weapon than it is for me as the Attorney General to buy a pistol. I would have to wait, if I have a waiting period of 10 days before I could buy a pistol. An 18-year-old can walk out the door with an assault weapon the day they walk in. And that's what happened with the shooter in Mukilteo. He walked into a Cabela's, 19 years old, and walked out with an assault weapon.
Well, this will sound a little bit cynical, but we all know the history of the voters on gun safety matters. Why are you going to the legislature when you know the voters are sort of stronger about this than the legislature?
So a couple things. So one is on that difference in the age and the background checks, the proposal I have is to make it the same. If you want to buy an assault weapon, you've got to be 21 and have that background check done by law enforcement. That's what's being heard tomorrow. In terms of whether or not this ends up as an initiative, look, I think that's possible, but my job is not to bring initiatives to the people, right? My job is to defend initiatives adopted by the people. So my role is I can make legislative asks and go through a legislative process, which we're doing. But I think it is entirely possible that if the legislature continues to refuse to act on any common sense gun reform, I think it's entirely possible you'll see these issues before the voters.
And the Alliance for Gun Responsibility is announcing something as well. Are you working exactly together, or are they doing something that's different? Because they mentioned the background checks.
Right. I don't want to get out too far ahead of them. They have a press conference tomorrow, but part of that press conference is to express their support for this background check and waiting period that we do not have right now for assault weapons, and to make it the same as it is for pistols.
So audience, if you want to join us, come on in and come up to the light and ask your questions. We have two journalists here kind of ready to go with a question. Don Shelton.
Yeah, Bob, I'd like to ask you, do you support a state income tax or a state capital gains tax, which has been cited as a way to fully fund K through 12 education?
Yeah, I'm open to either proposal. In fact, I think we need to address, believe me, as the attorney for the state, our job is to defend the legislature and the governor when it comes to McCleary. I'm the son of a public school teacher. She taught public education or public schools, special education for 20 years. So I support the need for increased revenues to address, hey, the court's clear direction. The state is in contempt, right, of court. That's not a place anybody wants to be. And so I think all options need to be on the table to address that, yes.
Greg Hanscom.
So yeah, I've got a question for you about the lawsuit against Trump's immigration ban. You know, Politico released some numbers this morning showing that while Trump's approval rating as president is remarkably low for a guy who's been in office for 11 days,
Right.
at least before the immigration order came out, his executive orders were actually enjoying some remarkable popularity. The most popular of his orders was his order to yank funding from sanctuary cities like Seattle. 55% approval rating, only 33% disapproved of that particular executive order. I'm wondering if you have gotten much pushback on the lawsuit over the immigration order.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can tell you the public view on any legal action I take, irrelevant. Voters have a chance every 4 years to decide if they like what I do or don't like what I do. Irrelevant. So I can tell you, I just don't spend any time thinking about it. What I have done is we've received a ton of email and phone calls, and so I asked my team to bring me, hey, 10 emails in support and in opposition. Last I heard, it was running more in support on the most recent action. But hey, on the assault weapons, it was just the opposite, a lot of opposition to it. So I tried to read a sampling of the feedback, pro and con, but that cannot drive my decisions, right? I'm the lawyer for the people of the state of Washington. My job is to go where the law goes, to go where the Constitution goes. And look, it's not just Donald Trump. I twice sued the Obama administration.
What did you sue the Obama administration for?
Cleanup at Hanford. Which we prevailed on, and we also have a separate litigation around worker safety at Hanford. And I've said some very hard things about the Obama administration as it relates to worker safety and the environment at Hanford. Look, the fact that President Obama is a man I deeply admire and respect and support, irrelevant to that conversation. It does not come up when I'm talking to my legal team about what action is appropriate for the state of Washington. And so fair is fair. That's how we approach it with the Obama administration. It's certainly how we approach it with this one. It's we're equal opportunity. If there are constitutional rights being violated and Washingtonians are being harmed, then I'm interested.
Has the volume of of correspondence gone up in the last week or two?
Oh my gosh! I mean, yeah, it's been. I wish I had. Yeah, I wish
nice and quiet down there.
Yeah, nice and quiet. No, it's
It's quiet in the newsroom. I can tell you that.
I sent flowers down to the front desk where they're taking all the calls. No, there's intense interest. There's intense interest on all these topics. Assault weapons had. I think it was thousands, you know, and on this topic, I know it's a very, very high volume.
Would you say they were mixed, pro and con?
My recollection is that on the assault weapons, banning the sale of assault weapons went more against what I was proposing, but on this proposal, on the Trump executive action, more in support. But strong views on both sides. I mean, want to be clear about that. Yeah, strong views on both sides. And look, I appreciate that, and that's great, but. It just can't move me. I mean, that's just not part of the job description, nor can it be. And frankly, if it was, that's a problem, right? As an attorney general, you just got to follow the law. And the good news from my perspective is, look, in a courtroom, it is not the loudest voice that prevails. It's the Constitution that prevails. And that's why I'm confident on this executive order of the president's. It'll be declared unconstitutional.
So we have an audience question. Hi.
Hi. Mr. Attorney General, I just wanted to applaud your work again on suing the Trump administration for their unconstitutional executive order. You set an example for the rest of the country to follow.
Thanks.
And I bring that up because, more broadly, I am also a supporter of your work in the Office of the Attorney General. I think the state of Washington itself sets an example for the country to follow in terms of how we protect both individual liberties here and the rights of businesses and all other stakeholders. I am, however, also an owner of an AR-15. And so the question that I'd like to ask you is does it ever occur to you, I mean, given that you also said that it seemed that there was a preponderance of negative feedback to your efforts to introduce a ban, does it ever occur to you that perhaps these efforts are contrary to the state's long tradition of broadly protecting individual and constitutionally protected rights?
Sure, so thanks for that question. And when it comes to the ban on assault weapons, that's obviously not a legal case, right? I'm making a legislative proposal that goes through a legislative process, so different fundamentally from the lawsuit against the Trump administration. Number two, while the emails have been more against it than in support, public polls, many public polls make clear that people actually support a ban on the sale of assault weapons. That's been made clear in the past year. So I think it's one of those issues where the people are actually ahead of the politicians. Politicians are notoriously cautious. Drives me insane, right? Whenever I leave public office, I don't want to have 1 ounce of political capital left over. I don't want that. I don't. Well, what's the point, right? What's the point in having it? And say what you think and do what you think. Say what you think and do what you think. Take those votes, right? Make those proposals. So do I think that people support it and are ahead of the politicians? I do. But frankly, more importantly, from my standpoint, I think it's the right thing to do. And I think one can hold that position and still be a supporter of the Second Amendment. I do. But states have passed similar laws, and those have been upheld by federal courts of appeals around the country. And the U.S. Supreme Court, even with Justice Rehnquist there, have allowed those decisions to stand. So what I'm proposing is absolutely constitutional. The challenge is legislatively getting it through. I mean, I'm obviously aware of public feedback, but again, I'm aware of it, but it can't drive my decisions. Yeah, I have to, but I think it's the right thing to do. Thanks.
And the rest of the audience, feel free to join us. Hey there, that was fast.
Good evening, Bob. Good evening. I want to applaud your efforts to raise the age of purchase of tobacco products, which I think is very important. And so I applaud you for that. I'm also interested in knowing what's happened with the funds that were received from the state, from the settlement that your predecessor, Attorney General Gregoire, received as a result of that big case with tobacco industry long ago. Are you happy with what's happening with those funds? Where can one track what's happened with those funds that the state is receiving as a result of that settlement?
That's a great question.
Where are those funds?
And there are folks here in the audience who work in my office who are engaged on issues related to tobacco as well. And so a couple thoughts. Number one, when Chris Gregoire was Attorney General, she led a group of attorneys general, as you're pointing out, to sue big tobacco around issues related to tobacco and advertising to kids, and had a massive settlement. It was really record-setting. Part of those funds were to be set aside to be used to educate teenagers and deter them from taking on tobacco and getting addicted to tobacco as teenagers. Unfortunately, as the years have gone by, the amount of funds used for those purposes have gone down dramatically. I wish I had the exact number, but it is a pittance compared to where it has been in the past. What the legislature's done, back to questions about McCleary, is they've used the bulk of those funds to address other general fund issues, which I think is unfortunate.
They were designated for a long time, and then they got kind of sucked in.
That's exactly right. And so that's been a real challenge. But I appreciate you raising that issue because a lot of folks don't realize that. I have proposed legislation, as you mentioned, to raise the age to purchase tobacco products and e-cigarettes from 18 to 21. Not winning me a ton of friends with big tobacco, right, by the way, but we think it is.
Isn't the legislature a little bit hooked on that money year in, year out?
You're going right where I was going to go, Joni. And so it makes all sorts of sense from a policy standpoint, right? When Chris Gregoire sued big tobacco, we received documents through the discovery process. And one of them from one of big tobacco companies, they literally have an internal memo saying 95% of folks who eventually get addicted to cigarettes are addicted by the time they're 21. In other words, if you're not addicted by the time you're 21, you almost certainly will not be. And they said to raise the smoking age, this is their internal documents. So if we raise the smoking age to 21, it will dramatically impact our key demographic. right? That's their own expert. So we know it makes a difference, and jurisdictions around the country are raising the age of 21, and they see, not surprisingly, a drop in the smoking age, or the drop in the smoking use of teenagers. To your point, the legislature's been reluctant to pass it, and they've been public about this because the fewer teenagers buying cigarettes are heavily taxed. That's less income for the state. And so they've been reluctant to do it because of the loss of revenue. And I'll just wrap up by saying on this topic, I know how I feel about the fact the legislature is balancing the budget, your budget, on the backs of getting teenagers addicted to tobacco. If you have thoughts about that, you can share that with your legislator.
Oh boy, Don Shelton.
I want to look ahead 3 years from now.
Yeah.
Would you consider a run for governor?
Oh, man. I just got reelected. Come on, I just got reelected. Look, I'll say this, is that...
I think this goes to your button collection, your political
is that coming up
button
later on?
collection.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'll say this, is that I believe that the most consequential position in politics right now is Attorney General. I believe that. And I think, and I have believed that since the day I ran for it. I think now, more and more, based on the conversation we're having, there's a greater awareness of how consequential being Attorney General is, whether it's taking on big tobacco, powerful interests not playing by the rules, holding the president to the rule of law. Look, I respect and admire folks who serve in the legislature, who serve in Congress, but it is attorneys general who can get you to a level playing field, a courtroom, right, where all that matters, again, not the loudest voice, right, but the law. And so I love the job for many reasons, but that most importantly.
So speaking of attorneys general, you and the Attorney General of Illinois recently filed a suit against Navient,
Yes.
Which is the largest servicer of student loans.
Yes.
The argument there is that Navient misleads borrowers and drives up loan repayment
To put it
costs.
mildly, yes.
And to put it mildly,
Yeah.
put it less than mildly.
Yeah, in fact, I just spoke this morning with Lisa Madigan. She's the Attorney General of Illinois, a great Attorney General. And so Navient, by the way, is sort of pulled away from Sallie Mae. So part of the lawsuit relates to
explain
conduct
that,
when
right.
Sallie Mae, which a lot of folks know Sallie Mae or have loans from Sallie Mae. But Navient is a servicer of loans, and as you said, the largest. They service for many, many folks around our country and in Washington State. And so it's significant litigation. And what it is, it's a whole range of conduct. It's hard to really get down to its essence, but they do a number of things. One is get students into loans that they know in advance these students will never be able to pay back. They also have specific examples that are truly maddening. So for example, you have someone co-sign your loan, right? What they have is if you can have payments every month on time for a couple years, your co-signer can be released. Makes sense? We have folks who said they paid in advance a couple months. So they would get a bill for $0.
To try to get ahead.
To get ahead.
Yeah,
So they
yeah.
would get bills for, they'd pay 3 months in January and have $0 bills for February, March, and April. Navient said, sorry, that doesn't count as payments each month on time, because you weren't making an actual payment each month. That's literally what they were doing. And so they do not do the basic work needed to give the options to borrowers to get into what's the best thing for the borrower. It may cost more for Navient, or may not be as cost effective for Navient, but drives up costs for folks. So many folks end up not being able to pay those loans back, and the credit history that's impacted on as a result of that is truly staggering. So look, student loan is a huge, huge issue. There's a greater awareness, I think, now in the past year or so. We have a lot of litigation going on around this issue, and it's an important one.
Audience, hi.
Hi, my name's Kristen Miatis Young, and I'm president of the board of a nonprofit investigative journalism studio called Investigate West. And I was just curious, as a citizen of Washington State who applauds your recent actions against the Trump administration, I wonder what were some of the possibilities for retaliation that you and your fellow discussed when deciding to make this move, and what we might expect to see coming down the line.
That's a great question. Like, what goes into the calculation? You're first out of the gate to, 11 days in or something like
Yes.
that to sue. What went into that calculation? That's
And
an
just because
interesting
I didn't
point.
quite, but you're asking, was there thought about what retaliation might come
What were some
from?
of the retaliatory actions that you discussed as possibilities for coming down the line for Washington State,
In other words, by the administration against the state of Washington, just so I'm clear, got
given
it.
the notoriously litigious leader?
Right. Look, anytime you're first on something of that magnitude, you're aware, obviously, there's going to be a bit more focus on you than maybe whoever comes second, third, or fourth, right? I guess I can just tell you how I handled it. Obviously, I gave the governor a heads up. It's my decision ultimately, but I wanted the governor to be aware. And we were essentially asked that question at the press conference when we announced it, and our answers were the same, is that when it comes to the constitutional rights of Washingtonians, you can't be leveraged for that. You can't worry about some response, right? For every action, there is a reaction. I think President Trump is seeing that now, right? But to be candid, while I'm aware that something like that is possible, that is not something, frankly, I worry about, right? That I need to do what I think is the right thing for the people of the state of Washington. That's paramount in my mind. Everything else is background noise. But in this case, because of the magnitude of the litigation, I did let the governor know, obviously, that, hey, this was going to be happening, and he obviously was a strong supporter of it, which I appreciated. So he's aware of it as well.
It's no secret that the likely new U.S. Attorney General is no fan of legal recreational pot. Yet pot is legal pretty much from the Mexican-California border to the North Pole, if you count Canada, which is coming a little slower. But so how is this going to play out? That's about 60 or 70 million people in the U.S. But we all know here in Washington, those of us who have written about legal recreational pot, that it was this experiment here, as it was called, was always at the discretion of the U.S. Attorney General. We now have a legislature that's talking about funding education out of pot tax dollars. They never get the numbers right on what it is. But, you know, how is this going to play out here? What have you heard already about that? Or is it too early to even ask that?
Well, I don't think it's too early to ask. It might be too early to answer, but it's not too early to ask. But I'll tell you what I'm going to do, right? Yeah. And that is that I have a letter prepared that when, if Senator Sessions is confirmed, which it seems like that is likely, that I'll be sending to him and essentially be laying out why what's happening in Washington State is a good thing, number one. Number two, that I intend to defend what we're doing in Washington in a court of law if the federal government chooses to try and fight it.
And that would be obviously with the attorneys general of other states, because California is now gearing up, Oregon, Alaska, the whole bit.
That's right. And then asking for a meeting. So back in 2013, shortly after I was elected and the governor was elected, we went back to meet with then U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. The sole topic of the conversation was marijuana. And my message there was to make clear to then Attorney General Holder that, hey, we were prepared to defend the initiative here in Washington State. That's my job. We did not want a legal fight. We wanted to work it out. And I really appreciate Eric Holder and the Obama administration giving room for states to move forward with this experiment, which other states are now doing. So, look, I hope not to have a confrontational relationship with the new Attorney General or the new administration on marijuana.
You're off to a heck of a start.
I'm off to. Well, I think it's always good to be clear about where I stand. I think it's good to be clear about where I stand, and where I stand is my job is to defend the will of the voters. They passed an initiative. We're moving forward with it, and it's my responsibility to defend it. I will make that absolutely clear to the new Attorney General, whoever that is.
So we're running out of time. If you can ask a really tight question and you can give a really tight answer, then we'll be all right.
I'll do my best. I really appreciate the statements you made about your role as Attorney General and also the sanctity of the rule of law and how it has basically been very important to our civil liberties. What I'm wondering is, you know, you said you wouldn't have filed the lawsuit if you weren't confident that it was unconstitutional, what the Trump administration did. What I'm wondering is, do you have any less confidence in given what we've seen in the last 11 days, that the rule of law will be upheld and followed going forward?
It's an interesting question. I guess I have to give a succinct answer, I guess, to a tough one.
You can do it.
I'm a lawyer, right? I believe in the rule of law. I do. And I have confidence in our system of government, and that we're a nation of laws, and that ultimately those will be followed. Look, I was asked before coming on, hey, would I accept a Supreme Court decision on our lawsuit if it ultimately went against me? Well, of course. I may not like it, but we are a nation of laws, and so it is my hope and expectation that will remain that way, and it's my job to ensure that that's the case.
So we are out of time for this segment. Thank you, Bob Ferguson, and we'll be back shortly. Thank you. And we are back to talk about the changing media landscape with Greg Hanscom, editor-in-chief of Crosscut.com, Karen Mathis, president and general manager of KUOW-FM, Tim Keck, publisher of The Stranger, and Don Shelton, executive editor of the Seattle Times. A little full disclosure here, wearing different hats. I work for or have worked for almost all of these folks, except for you, Tim Keck. And I'm coming for you next. I'm coming for you next. All right. A little red meat for at least two of you. Donald Trump's right-hand man, Steve Bannon, has described the media as the opposition and said, and I don't talk like this, but has said that the media should just shut up and listen for a while. Well, guys, why don't you just be quiet and listen for a while? Karen Mathis.
Because that's not our role. We're the citizens' voice in the room. We're their chance to ask the questions and figure out how the heck this is going to impact their lives, and we will never shut up, ever, ever.
Tim Keck, I thought maybe you might want to take a stab at that one.
We are the opposition. He's right, and we're the proud opposition. After Trump won, the first thing we did the next day was had a meeting, and the message of that meeting from all of us was everybody's job just got more important, and everybody here's job just got more important. And we are the opposition. It's true.
So Don and Greg, and in that order, what is your media company's strategy for dealing with an idea-a-day political leader? It's like watching a fireworks show. Look there, look there. How do you even remember to cover what transpired yesterday or even the day before?
It's an interesting problem to have. I mean, in some ways, Trump's our worst enemy. In some ways, he's our best friend because people are reading whatever we write. But we have to remember that we shouldn't be completely partisan. We have to tell the truth. We have to question authority. But we can't come from one angle or the other. That's not what we should be doing. So we have to cover the news, and we have to cover it every day, but we have to be mindful of what we're there for, which is ask questions, tell the truth, speak for the common man.
Greg Hanscom.
So I think this is kind of unfair because he's got a bigger newsroom than I do.
Well, how did that happen?
I hate to make this a conversation about the size of the newsrooms, but that's what it's come to.
I see.
So Crosscut has a news team of five people. And so at this point, the news is coming at us far more quickly than we can respond to it. And ultimately, at Crosscut, what we try to do is not just respond to the news, but we try to provide some commentary, some analysis, some context, and we're always trying to sort of stay a couple of steps ahead of what's coming at us. So we've just had to make some really difficult decisions about what we're going to cover and what we're not going to cover. There's
what
so
aren't
much
you going to cover?
Well, here's an example. We had a reporter at the airport on Saturday during the protests at the airport over Trump's immigration order. There was another protest the following day on Sunday in Westlake Park. We decided not to send someone. We decided to give our crew one day of the week off and get back on the ground.
That's fresh in this business, right? The one day a week. So we brought you here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of local media. Don Shelton, the Seattle Times just completed another round of layoffs. I frankly have lost count of how many rounds of layoffs there have been. What is the real future of the Seattle Times? Will it be here in 5 years?
Well, yes, it will be, and that's my job to keep it there and keep it where it is and keep it healthy. And unfortunately, it's a newspaper, media, national, international thing. The problems that the newspaper industry is going through are not just the Seattle Times, it's everyone. And we had to make those cuts to stay healthy and to keep doing what we do. And we still have the largest newsroom in the Northwest. We'll continue to do what we do and give readers what they want. But unfortunately, every newspaper is going through those difficult decisions and downsizing.
So, but who will own the paper and what will it look like? Will it be print? Will it be digital? What are we talking about?
It'll be, I think for the foreseeable future, print and digital are both going to be there. Print's still paying most of the bills for most newspapers. Digital is rising, the advertising revenue. I think the digital subscription model is the answer. That's become pretty clear to me and a lot of other people in the last year that digital advertising is not going to pay the bills, that you have to have a product that people are willing to pay for by subscribing. And we actually put out a call to arms about 2 weeks ago and told our readers that this was the time, if they were supporting us, that we needed their help, and we asked them to subscribe.
I want to remind the audience that we do welcome your questions. You know the drill. Aris is ready for your questions. Come under the light and you can ask a question. Karen Mathis.
That whole issue of marshaling resources is really resonating with me, though. You can't do everything. You can't. But we've dedicated a whole unit of our enterprise teams in our newsrooms to Trump administration and the impact on the Puget Sound region and state of Washington. So are there other things that we're not doing while we're focusing on
So there's
that?
like a Trump team or something?
There's a Trump team, and we're
I know
looking
the
at...
New York Times dedicated like $5 million to covering the Trump administration.
But almost, no matter how big you are, you have to marshal. We have the 6th largest public radio newsroom of any single station in the single stations in the NPR system, and we still have to make choices. So I think that's what you're going to see media doing, is making choices and allocating resources in a focused way.
Tim, did you want to say something about that? Marshaling resources?
Yeah, well, with Trump, it gives some clarity, right? For you, but it also demands resources, right? So you have to make choices. But I think that everybody's job has gotten more important, and every single person who's doing reporting on a city, cities are going to be under attack, right? We've already with Bob Ferguson, we already had those discussions, right? Of pot, of women's health, all those kind of issues. Cities are going to be under attack, and local media is the people who are going to be really incredibly important aspects of it. And so when layoffs happen at the Times, it's a tragedy for the whole city, because we need more reporters and we need more people doing that. And so the need is higher and the resources are lower.
So Karen Mathis, I'm not sure I'm right about this, so correct me if I get this wrong. But does the decline in print in our area boost NPR and KUOW? What do you know about this, and how do you describe this?
Oh, our status in the landscape. Well, traditionally, public radio news always goes up in a presidential election cycle. And so when we're comparing our numbers, you compare...
leading up to the election.
Yeah, every
right.
4 years you have this bump, and then it kind of settles back down. So this bump has been bigger, regardless of what other people in the market are doing. I tend to think that the upswing is going to be a bit more sustained this time. I think, the stories we've just seen in these first, 11 or 12 days, there's just something a minute coming out. And so I suspect that we were going to see a sustained rise just because of interest. There is a chance and a slight fear that I have that people may get a little bit fatigued. And someone said to me, can't you just do something happy, step away from this for a while? And I said, well, you as a listener, as a consumer, have the luxury of taking a respite. We don't. And when you're ready to come back, we'll be here.
I think
Tim
we're all
Keck fatigued. There's nobody who's not fatigued, right?
You looked like you were going to disagree with her in a way.
Oh, I was just going to say that we're all fatigued. Consumers of news, people who are doing it. It's been 11 days, and it seems.
So the audience is not fatigued. We have a question.
Oh, you're going to hold. So I have a question about bias. So reporters, it seems increasingly in Seattle, are sort of coming out from behind the veil of this non-biased fallacy of report. I mean, that's obviously my own bias. But that's been happening more and more in Seattle. And we're starting to recognize that the people who do the news are also people, and they come from someplace and they have a perspective. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your organizations are doing, either to support that or perhaps what you would like to do, or can you speak a little bit about that shift? Do you support it? Do you not? Maybe address.
Could you direct your question to one or two of these folks? So that we can get to
let's go with the Seattle Times and with Crosscut.
Okay.
All right.
I'll go first. I mean, I think there's a difference between reporters and columnists, and sometimes I don't think all readers are clear on that, but reporters should report the news. They have to do it with authority. They obviously have a viewpoint. They have to keep that out of the news. There's columnists that are paid for their opinions, informed opinions. They have to base it on facts. And there's also a difference between the newsroom in the Seattle Times and the opinion section, the editorial section of the paper. And we have separation of power there. And we don't talk to them. We don't have control over what they do. They don't have control over what we do. And I think people don't understand that. We do talk to our reporters and our editors about keeping the biases out of it. I think there's a sense from readers that we're this leftist rag that is, completely left. And then I think there's some, I know, well, it depends on your perspective. I know. I've heard it from some, but there's also people that think we're way too conservative on other issues. And I think it's a good day when I get an email or a phone call from a reader cussing us out for being too far left, and one saying we're too far right. We're doing our job when we do that.
But Don, don't you feel like when you read a story, you're a sophisticated consumer of news.
Sure.
When you read a story, right, you know what the writer feels like, right? Come on.
As an editor, if I do, I try to take that out of it if it's a reported
Right,
story.
when you're reading, how about other news sources,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, you can tell.
Right.
I mean, there's signals, but
Okay,
you have to be careful.
And is the
of that.
quality of reporting in your opinion pieces the same level of quality as your news pieces?
Absolutely.
Right,
It
so
should
it's
be
just
as good.
a different tone, right?
Different tone.
Okay.
Yep.
So Greg Hanscom.
Yeah, so I mean, I would say you're absolutely right. I think the lines have blurred a lot in the last 10, 15 years. That's what blogs have done for us. That's what social media has done for us. I think more and more people are following individuals more than brands, right? They follow Danny Westneat. They follow David Croman. They know these people and they trust their work. That being said, I think it's more important than ever right now for journalists to maintain some professional distance from their subjects. If nothing else, they've got to be challenging themselves, right? We saw what happened during the election when the media was pretty confident, I think, that Hillary Clinton was going to win as president. How many stories were missed during that election that we should have been telling and just weren't? So I think the key here is, regardless of whether you work for The Stranger, the Seattle Times, you've got to be challenging yourself. You've got to be asking those questions, those sort of next level questions. And frankly, I think you've got to get out of the bubble. So the first thing that we did at Crosscut after the election results, we watched Seattle react with shock. We sent our staff reporter east of the mountains to talk to people there about why they voted for Trump. What happened out there that we just missed in Seattle? So I think that's, I think those are kind of the challenges that I've put to our writers is you've got to get out of your own bubble, you've got to challenge every assumption that you make, and you've got to talk to people who don't fit the mold.
So to that point, Karen Mathis, what mistakes did the media make in the 2016 election? Before it's all the way into the history books here, what are some of the top mistakes that were made?
Well, I think we didn't get out enough. We didn't talk to the people that are this movement, and it's still continuing. People are trying to blame Trump's ascension on fake news, and it's like, hey, what about just half the population liked what he was saying? I think people are trying to find other reasons why, and so we've gone to Mason County too, trying to get these other voices, and we do that for two reasons. One of the real dangers I see right now, I lament the loss of the fairness doctrine. So you've got these echo chamber news units where you can bump around for weeks and months and never hear an idea with which you didn't already agree, and you'll never be served up anything different. And the fairness doctrine's been gone for 30 years, and now we're paying for it. And so we can bang on facts all day long, and there are major segments of the community that will never hear it and never see it because people don't integrate their news consumption. Quartz.com claims that 1 in 5 of every U.S. newspaper did not cover the Women's March, even if they had a march in their own town. So that's really terrifying to me. So the only way that we're going to get some integrated consumption is if we go out and start talking to these other voices, unconventional to whatever our current core audience is, bring them in so they can see and hear themselves, and then they'll start hearing a different fare than what they're currently consuming.
Tim Keck, back here in the bubble, I have a question for you, and that is...
I think our bubble should be bulletproof bubble. I think we need a bubble over Seattle.
I think I saw that on TV. I'm pretty sure I saw that show on TV. But so media landscape here. The way this used to feel to me anyway, as a longtime Seattle Times person, that the media landscape was the Seattle Times and the PI, sort of the big dogs in town. Some pretty good TV newsrooms at the time. But somehow when the PI tanked, the Stranger and KUOW rose in influence in this market. Is that about right? What do you think of that?
I do think that is true.
And sort of,
And I think it's great.
Give me a moment or two of it. Was it your cover piece of Mike McGinn, you know, also known as an endorsement or whatever?
No, I think that the Stranger, you know, we don't take an objective voice. We are a publication of opinion and reported arguments. And I think that people tire of this person said this, the other side said this. Who knows what the answer is? Or conversely, you read a piece and you know that the writer on the Seattle Times side, that they're against the train. I can get a sense of that, and those feelings I think give something the honest voice of the Stranger. I think people like that aspect of it. I also think that we did things like embrace the web a lot earlier than a lot of folks did, and I think that's another aspect of it.
Audience question, and say for who?
So I guess primarily to Karen, but you know, we have a lot of people devoting Trump teams, you know, people going out and covering what the Trump administration wants to do. And aren't we in effect pandering to what the Trump administration wants by making the Trump administration the focus of what we all listen to? And shouldn't we be much more concerned with business as usual and what the country needs, and ignoring the persiflage out there of perhaps the tirade that doesn't need to be listened to?
Well, I think you make a good point about separating the wheat from the chaff. So, and the distraction tweets of, oh, look over here, and then there's something else going on. But you know, I think the current administration would be more than happy for us not to cover them. I don't think that's the thing to do, because you've seen, you know, such rapid fire activities happening, and some people are saying, well, wait, give it a chance. Well, if we wait and give it a chance, what may we wake up to a month from now? So I think the focus is important, because every day something major has come out that has impact on the lives of the citizens of the Puget Sound region. So we're trying to cover it through that lens of what does this mean for this community and this region. And I think the laser beam is called for more than ever before.
So Greg Hanscom, crosscut.com is an interesting part of the emerging media landscape here. But with so many other media organizations declining, how is there room for you in this market?
The more they decline, the more room there is, frankly. And you know, Crosscut was started back in 2007 as a response to sort of the collapse of some of the traditional media models. So the PI was on the verge of imploding. You know, the trends were downward. And our founder said, let's create a new local news product that is digital only, strip away a lot of the costs involved in print. And create this space where the community can come for smart conversation, right? So the idea with Crosscut is not to cover every tweet or every breaking news event. We don't have the people to do that. We talk a lot about breaking insight. So instead of, we let the Times do its thing, we let KUOW and the Stranger do their things, and what we try to do is stand back and put it into context, add perspective, and sort of add that value, so partly so that people who are overwhelmed with all of the noise on social media and elsewhere can sort of step back and just get at, you know, get a sane perspective on things.
Your merger with KCTS 9 now, together you are Cascade Public Media. Is that like a formula? Does that explain how the financials can work on that?
That certainly helps. Yeah, so Crosscut was a very small, scrappy nonprofit of its own for a number of years. We merged with KCTS 9 Public Television a year ago. And the idea there is KCTS wanted an online news product. Crosscut was really going to benefit from having a sort of a development staff, a membership staff. It's been a great marriage so far, but it really does sort of make the economics work.
So Don Shelton, you recently wrote a letter to readers, and it made me think that the Trump administration, just by its existence, is a marketing tool for you folks. And I'm thinking about these words, extraordinary events unfolding around us. Was that what you were doing?
Well, it wasn't an intentional marketing ploy. The timing was pretty good for it, but it was something I've been thinking about doing for a while and had put it off, and finally decided to do it. I did it a couple of weeks, and then the weekend that we released the letter, we put it out. We printed it in the paper. We also put it on our website. We sent it out by email to readers and subscribers, and we put it in our newsletter. So it got out in a lot, and social media as well too. Got out there in a lot of different ways, and the timing was perfect because Trump did his immigration thing, and things just ignited. And we had our normal subscription rate. We have a goal each month of how many subscribers we want to attract, and we did that in about 5 days.
So for all of
Pretty
you,
crazy.
Did everybody here just say yes or no? Have you seen subscriptions and readership and listenership go up? The New York Times announced, oh my gosh, they have so many more subscriptions. Washington Post, Vanity Fair, because they had a restaurant critic that thing lit up. Is it everybody, yes or no?
Yes.
Sure. Everybody's online and
just
engaged, right?
So I'm going to get in trouble if I don't go for an audience question here.
Hello, I'm sort of a journalism junkie that some of you may know. And anyway, we are now living in an era where we have Nazi-like propaganda coming out of Washington that is poisoning the public opinion against the media. I read something in a reputable publication today that said it's true, more than 51% of Americans don't trust the media. That scares me to the bottom of my souls. Probably nobody here ascribes to that, but what do you think the media can do to get Americans to trust it again? That's my biggest fear. No, I have too many big fears.
We can only deal with a couple here.
Right now, this is my current fear. So how can the media get back trust?
We need to talk to more people and treat them fairly, not talk at them and about them like they're stupid, and let them see and hear their perspectives and opinions in our coverage.
Here's my real pointed question. How do you wean them from Fox News? That is my point. That is my pointed question. Okay.
Anybody else want to stand down?
I think look at the New York Times and and Washington Post, and how they've done it is they've become tougher. They put the word lie in headlines now, above the fold. They've become tougher, and people want it. People want to hear the truth, and they want it to be told toughly. And so, if that's a word, is it, Judy? I don't think that.
We make words here all the time.
I think
we have no problem.
By people subscribing more, if you're getting all those increased subscriptions, that's a vote of trust. So I think that it's people are trusting media more. They're trusting the Times more.
Well, I think too, for many years when it was a print-dominated landscape, newspapers didn't know. They thought they knew what their audience wanted more than we thought we knew what they wanted. They want this, they want that. Now, the analytics tell us exactly what is popular, what people are reading, what they want, when they want to consume it. And I think we have to listen to the readers and the audience more than we do. And that doesn't mean you pander to them. That doesn't mean you throw out clickbait headlines and stuff that's just after an audience. But you do have to relate to them and watch what they want. And not pandering, but give them what they're asking for.
And cover the hell out of it, right? Just do your job. And cover the hell out of it.
And they're reading the coverage of the political landscape right now.
Well, so to this point of alternative facts and fake news, Facebook has announced a couple of measures that they're taking. They have gotten rid of some of the bad purveyors of fake news, and they have this system, a complicated system of fact-checking and then sort of warning consumers about material that has been labeled as false. Is it enough?
No, it's absolutely not. I mean, it's great that various social media platforms have started to crack down on fake news. What they need to do now is start promoting real news. So all of these tools,
how do you do that?
all of these tools are great, right? So it's great that we now have these sort of crowdsourced fact-checking tools. We've got some fact checkers sort of within Facebook and Twitter, sort of keeping an eye on what is not true. But I'll speak as the editor of a small nonprofit. To put our stories in front of readers on social media, we have to pay for it. right? So your feed, your Facebook feed is not just kind of this chronology of what all of your friends and neighbors are posting on Facebook. It's you get what people are paying to put in front of you. And until the social media outlets actually start promoting the real news and the good news, we're going to continue to struggle.
Let me turn it up a notch. What does Facebook and the other social media folks need to do to combat this idea that there are alternative facts and there's fake news?
Yeah, well, that's a tough one because this is not a new phenomenon. I remember sitting behind the one-way glass 12 years ago in a focus group, and the facilitator was asking, when's the last time you put something new in your news diet? And people, well, when I got a new phone, there was a news button. And they said, oh, and where's that news from? I don't know, the phone company? and that's okay with you that that's new? So we've been lax as consumers about sourcing forever. And I think that's going to be a hard, lazy habit to break.
And Facebook doesn't care. Facebook doesn't care that you get fake news.
They had a hard time admitting that some of
They don't care. It's not their, they've never stated it. They're a business that delivers content. They're like a particle accelerator, right? Where they strip away brand, they strip away context, and they deliver it, and they absorb the advertising revenue for it. And so it's not their mission or not their job to inform you correctly. They want you to take the pellets that you're addicted to. And what you'd like to get is the news that you are like. And so I think that one thing that's going to combat that is not Facebook, though perhaps they'll add something to it, but the return of the brand. I think that brand has been eviscerated over the years, media brands, and I think now people are going to at least take a look at what that brand is. They might see Crosscut and like, I trust those guys. And so I think that the return of brand is going to be a valuable aspect to fighting fake news. But I'm not going to hold my breath and wait for Facebook to say, oh, I'll take care of you guys.
So we have time for another audience question.
Hi, I love Seattle. I grew up here, and I have lived in the South too, and that broadened my perspective. And I noticed people, including adults in Seattle, no offense, I love the city, but we're in this leftist bubble that's really great and fun, but it's not realistic. And I feel like with the majority of the country is not Seattle, and does not agree with Seattle. And so I guess I'm wondering if there's time. Honestly, I'm wondering everyone's what your informed opinion is about creating dialogue between people on the left and the right. Is it possible? Is it necessary? Is there something else we should be doing?
I don't want Seattle to become more like where I'm from in small town Wisconsin. I want small town Wisconsin to be more like Seattle. Seattle has human rights. Seattle is a good place for business. You can make a living. There's arts, those kind of things. Seattle is a good place. It shouldn't try to be a crappier place. I just completely reject that.
To respond to that, really what I mean is I see a lot of people in Seattle being content because things are nice here.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
That was so Stranger. That was the guy at the Stranger. So Don, why don't you jump in?
We spoke to this a little while ago about how, you have to go out and find differing opinions sometimes, and it is really easy to, when there's demonstrations in the streets of Seattle, anti-Trump demonstrations and things like that, to just cover that and not cover the other side. So you do have to go outside your bubble. You have to go to Eastern Washington. You have to go to the suburbs. There are people out there that voted for Trump and believe in him, and we have to give them some voice as well. We talk a lot about this, though, and we just talked about this week in the newsroom about the necessity of going out there and finding other viewpoints.
You guys have all said that, but to do what? Whose mind do you want to change?
We're not changing anybody's mind.
You just want to be curious? You're just curious of why people are racist?
No, it has nothing to do with racism.
Right.
But I understand that. We don't want to print lies. We don't want to print that. But we need to hear their perspective.
Okay, so it's just a learning.
And if you bring it down to the one human at a time level, I know that may feel like it's slow, but it's impactful. I mean, one of our, Ross Reynolds is sitting here, one of our biggest franchises that's really taken off is our ASCA series. Ask a Muslim, ask a Trump supporter, ask a cop, and you get a dozen or more people in a room, and you get them one-on-one talking to each other, because our goal is to help you form your personal truth about the world, enhanced by the opinions and perspectives of people not like you, because it's not going to be a holistic view unless you do get out of your bubble. And so, one gathering at a time, one person at a time, but hopefully with spreading impact, that's one of the things that KOW is trying to do.
We had this debate before the panel about, do we protect the bubble or do we burst the bubble? And Tim was like, I want the bubble stronger, and I was like, no, burst the bubble, no, keep the bubble. But I think ultimately we've seen what the bubble does, right? This election was a major wake-up call, right? If you look at my Facebook feed, like, I could believe that all the world is rising up and marching in the streets. If you look at the recent polling, a lot of the stuff that President Trump is doing has a really high approval rating, right? So it's not just about peace, love, and understanding. It really is about how we come together and create a government and a society that actually works, rather than this society that is just constantly at itself and each other. So.
And do you have any ideas on how to do that?
Well, heck.
Tim, did you know?
Tim, you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, we are, Crosscut is we're getting people out of the city. So Inauguration Day, for example, we sent our team out of Seattle to seek out Trump supporters who were watching that inauguration speech and loving it.
Charles Boudet suggested people come and stay with his family. He's like, why don't the people who are voting for Trump come and see how humans behave?
Yeah, exchange programs, right? There used to be a farm exchange program where Western Washingtonians could go and stay on a farm in Eastern Washington, and vice versa, right? And just like anything to get people talking to each other. Literally, from our reporting, I think the people in Eastern Washington think that Seattle is just a running WTO protest. For real, right? And the people in
Wait,
Seattle...
there's not a running WTO protest here?
Yeah, there it goes. And the people in Seattle have their own sort of, misconceptions of what goes on outside of this city. And as long as we continue to live in those bubbles and have these notions about each other, we're never getting anywhere.
Okay, and so we'll take one more question from the audience. Thank you for your question.
Hello. I work for going back to business, I work for an organization, and we just did an extensive survey on millennials and livability and affordability in Puget Sound. And it is millennials in King County itself. I think they're one of the largest generations with populations here. And we're always wondering, or we're always debating whether or not they're givers, supporters of our organization, of other organizations. And just knowing that and moving forward, I'm wondering what your companies and organizations are doing to engage with them, how to make them followers, supporters, like letting them know what the dollar sign actually means when it comes to reporting.
Don, why don't you start on the millennials?
We're all trying to figure that out. I mean, do you subscribe to or read the Seattle Times?
Yes.
All right, thank you. I'll answer that question then.
That was apparently the correct answer.
We have not reached the millennial audience very well, and we're trying to figure that out. And so one of the main initiatives I'm going to have this year, or we're going to have at the Seattle Times, is trying to reach the millennial audience in different ways. And it's not the way we're doing it right now. But we also have a really strong audience that's older, boomers, my age group and younger, and we have to keep those too. So it's a tricky thing. You don't want to lose the one audience. They're paying the bills, they're buying the advertising, they're paying for subscriptions. But how do you attract the younger readers?
Climate change.
There you go.
Anybody else want to?
But I think it's a really active audience,
here?
and they do want to read. And the other thing I wanted to say too is that even though it's kind of doom and gloom in the media landscape about layoffs and things like that, we've never had a time when more people read the Seattle Times, and probably a lot of your publications too. We have more eyeballs on our stories than ever before, than we ever did 20 years ago. It's just that we haven't figured out a business model where we can get people to actually pay for it. And that's what we're trying to figure out.
So at Crosscut, so our largest age demographic in terms of our readers at Crosscut is 25 to 34-year-olds, which is not maybe what you would expect from Crosscut, but they are young and they're strong and they're reading Crosscut.
Has that changed since the early days of Crosscut?
That's changed
I would
quite
think
a lot.
It has.
Yeah. Now, if you looked at the demographics of our donors and our dues-paying members, that shifts to the older side significantly. But listen, when I was 25, okay, I was subscribing to the local newspaper and donating to NPR, but that's just me, right? Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Our challenge is some of it is age-based, but some of it is you are self-creating, no matter what age you are, people are self-curating, self-creating their own media experience. So if you're pulling something from KOW, something from NPR1, something from WNYC, when you're in the mood to put something in the collection plate, whose collection plate? So we're trying to figure out, how do we get you be sticky enough that you're ready to give, and then how do we stand out of the crowd and say, hey, I know you've listened to 15 different things, but what about KUOW? So that's a challenge for us as well. I think it's just relevance and resonance you give to the one that speaks to you the best.
I think we'll all follow the lead of our millennial overlords at the stranger we have. They're our audience and the staff. But I think that this moment, right, is a huge moment, right? When you're out on the streets marching, you see a lot of young people, and I think they're more engaged with news, and they want real information just like everybody else. Everybody's hungry for real, true facts, not the other kind of facts.
Okay, real tight, because we're running out of time here.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Karen to comment on my observation that the ratio of news to commentary I hear on KUOW is the same I get from KTTH and KVI, Fox and ABC.
Wow, I would challenge you on that. I'd push back in a major way, and to make sure that's not fake news, I will have somebody do a culling of the ratio of what that...
And I'll join you. We'll sit down together and listen. And Seattle is blessed with a very strong conservative radio presence, along with KUOW.
Okay, sounds like you're going to have a meeting. That is all we have time for. If we can produce a meeting. We shall be back in March with the presidents of the University of Washington and Washington State University. Thank you so much for being here, and thanks a ton for watching. Thank you.